what is codependency? Once I saw a cartoon book, and it said that the codependent handshake was this, and that the codependent salute was this. I really like, though, Richard Rohr's definition where he says it's an overreaction to things or people, etc., outside of you, and an underreaction to things, feelings, so forth, inside of you. So ultimately, what is it? Years ago, I had a woman come in and she told me that she wanted to divorce her mom because she was codependent. And I said, well, what's your mom doing? And she explained how her father was a horrible alcoholic. He was a binge drinker. And that her mother had never left her father. And so she had to be codependent, and it was an embarrassment to her. And so I said, well, tell me about your mom. What is her life like? And she said, well, she's in this finance club. She's in a bridge club. She leads a Bible study for her church. And, she said, yeah, it's a pretty good life. But my dad still goes out on these incredible benders, and then she lets him back in when he comes home. And I said, well, when he's out on one of his benders drinking and disappears, what does your mom do? And he says, well, she just kind of goes on with life. I said, well, does she seem to get depressed? Does she seem to get down? And she said, no, as a matter of fact, she still does her finance club and her bridge club and her Bible study. And what does she do when he comes home? And she said, that's what really bothers me, because she is so nice to him. I mean, she just nurses him back to health. And I said, well, her moods, do they seem to follow what happens with your dad? I mean, does she get down? Or she said, no, she just lives her life. And I said, well, honestly, I don't know whether or not your mom's a codependent, because it's just as likely that she could be an angel. But the person I know that was codependent in that conversation was that poor woman, because her happiness was really kind of based on what her mom did or didn't do. She was dependent on mom doing something so she could be okay. To me, codependency is really kind of a form of, it's a counterfeit love. It's where you're in a one-way relationship. In other words, you basically love in order to get your needs met. You love in order to be loved. You're doing things to get something in return. We give in order to get. We look for someone outside of us to fill that inner void. I know that in my codependency, it played out in being a fabad. That's fear of being a disappointment. And that's almost an inverted form of narcissism, because if you're always thinking about other people, but you're thinking about what they're thinking about you, you're still thinking about you even while you think about them. And my fear of disappointing other people meant that I was living for them. I wasn't loving them, but I was using them to get my needs met. So here are a few characteristics of codependence, so you can kind of ask yourself, what is my reason for doing what I do? They often find themselves in relationships with emotionally unavailable people, looking to those people to meet their needs. They're overly caring to the point of self-neglect, and they often will feel victimized because, again, they keep doing and giving, and they'll give 90%, hoping just to get 10% back. But again, if you're doing or if you're giving in order to get, it's still codependency. It's not pure love, because love isn't looking for the return. It's actually just acting in the best interest of another person. Oftentimes, codependents have an inability to say no. They avoid conflict with people to the point of being unable to speak the truth because they're too worried about disappointment. Oftentimes, they have a willingness to compromise their own values for the sake of pleasing others. The codependent will often be overly focused on other people's problems and needs without really even doing self-care, taking care of themselves. They worry so much about others' feelings that it has a direct effect on their feelings. They can't be okay unless everybody else is okay. they are always doing for others what they should be doing for themselves. Frequently, there's just an inability to say no because they've got to make the other person happy. True love, on the other hand, it acts in the best interest of another person. It's really about risking and caring and not needing something back from that other person. Sadly, a codependent relationship, oftentimes, especially if you've got two codependents, it feels like it's two ticks and no dog. We don't fall over what we do in life. We fall over why we do it. And I can be loving towards someone and not expecting something back, or I can be loving someone expecting them to do something back in return for me. When I'm looking for the return, at that point, it becomes codependency. So look at your own behavior. If your sense of safety, if your sense of okayness is really based on how another person is doing, then you might want to step back, not in a sense of, disengagement, but in a sense of separating yourself with boundaries from another person where you can love them, but not need them, to healing.